UnTithed, co-authored with Michelle Nolden. 1. Miraculina. Daytime smothers her in vibrant colors. The sun illuminates secrets she holds close. Night is better. It flows in hues of gray and black and streetlights that don't disturb the shadows. She slips through darkness like vapor. Sometimes Miraculina is uncomfortable in her evolving relationship with her mother and father. Her parents chose her embryo self to save her brother, then chose her to be a tithe to save dozens of people. Then, they didn't sign the unwind order when she turned 13. She knows they did it out of love. She's learning to be grateful. Most times, she's glad to be around her folks. But if she doesn't act like an ordinary 14-year-old girl, her father turns moody and her mother cries. She spent her entire life preparing her body to be divided. She needs time to reboot for this unexpected future. She once read that sometimes you have to act like you believe until you can believe. In pretending to be ordinary and pretending to be glad she has this long, unpredictable future, maybe she's learning how to live like a normal girl. After she was brought home from her adventure, as they call it, the adventure that brought her all the way to Tucson, Arizona, with a notorious tithe turned clapper turned rebel, nothing was the same. Her parents thought it would be uncomfortable for her at their old church, so now they go to a new one. Now they attend a larger Roman Catholic church in an older suburb of Chicago that reminds her of the formality, ceremony, and beauty of the cathedrals in Rome. And because her parents wanted to give her a fresh start, she now goes to the parochial school near the church. Whatever. You'll make new friends, her parents told her, and no one has to know what happened. But her only real friends at her school were tithes. At her old school were tithes. She doesn't know how to make regular friends. Most days at school aren't so bad. They wear uniforms. Even though the skirt is a bright plaid of red and navy blue, the blouse is white, like the clothes she wore when she was a tithe. White is either the absence of color or the presence of all colors, depending on how you look at it. The whiteness of the blouse feels familiar, but on the other hand, it tethers too uncomfortably to her abandoned purpose. So now, when she isn't wearing the school uniform, she wears black, like the nuns. Besides, black blends better into the night. Miraculina still has dreams of all of the time she escaped the Kavanaugh mansion with Lev, only to be taken by the parts pirate. The nightmare always comes in the early morning hours, and in her waking hours, she thinks too much about Lev as well. She's not sure what that means. She's pretty sure he's dead. He must be. When she last saw him, the juvie cops were rounding up the kids at the airplane graveyard for unwinding. Then she was tranked. Then she was in a police car being spirited back to her new old life. But what if he's alive? Is he still in AWOL? If she saw him again, would she slap him silly or throw her arms around him? And if he is alive, does he think about her as much as she thinks about him? With a long future stretching before her, she knows she shouldn't waste time thinking about someone who's probably dead. Better to focus on church, on saving lives, and on other matters of eternity. Not cheese puffs, please, says one of the guests at the soup kitchen. If I have to eat another cheese puff, I'll barf. Even though it's warm inside the community center, he wears a long woolen coat. Do you have potato chips? The best thing about the new church is the soup kitchen and the thrift store in the community center. They give bags of groceries to the needy. They serve dinner during the week and a special supper after Mass on Sundays. Clothing is distributed in the evenings and on Saturday mornings with coffee and cookies. They even have beds for those who want them. There are a lot of opportunities for a girl like Miraculina to help out. She works in the community center every chance she gets. It's not exactly donating a liver, but it's something. Coming through, a nun yells. She slips a full vat of sloppy Joe mix into the steam table in front of Miraculina. I may have made a batch a little spicier than usual, so make sure you warn people. Sister Barbara, named after Saint Barbara, who was beheaded by her father in the 3rd century, runs the community center with Father Lawrence from St. Lawrence, roasted over coals in Panisperna. Miraculina learned about martyrs in religion class last week. The idea appeals to her. On the other side of the counter, a tiny girl with fat pigtails waves a chocolate chip cookie at Miraculina. "Thank you," the girl says and hurries off before Miraculina can say, "You're welcome." As she spoons coleslaw next to the sloppy joes on their plates, a boy in line catches her eye. For a moment, she thinks he looks like Lev and almost drops the plate. Then, she sees that it's not Lev. In fact, it really doesn't look like him at all. She puzzles over what made her think of Lev when a thought electrifies her. The way the boy ducks his head and mumbles his "thank you" when she hands him his meal is what an AWOL does. She glances out the window to see Father Lawrence on the street talking to some of the homeless in line. Father Lawrence can usually tell if one of the younger guests is running from an unwind order and does what needs to be done. Maybe the boy snuck past him. Or maybe the boy told him he was 18. No way is he 18. "Hey, Mira," says Sister Barbara. "It's Miraculina, sister," she says politely. When she finishes spooning coleslaw on the next few plates, she turns to the nun and cringes. Sister Barbara is waving a red Hawaiian blouse like a bullfighter. "Someone dropped it in the donation barrel yesterday, and I thought of you. It'll look much prettier than all those black outfits you wear. What do you think?" She wouldn't wear something that gaudy even by a papal decree. I couldn't take something meant for the homeless, sister, and it's a bit flashy for you, and it's a little bit flashy for me." "Nonsense," Sister Barbara holds the shirt up against Miraculina. "You're young. You could use a little flash." Which is funny because the nuns often complain about how provocatively other kids dress, but apparently there are limits to modesty as well. Miraculina gently pushes the Hawaiian shirt away. "I appreciate the thought, Sister Barbara, but my mom chooses my clothes," which is mostly a lie, as her mother has been buying bright shirts and dresses for Miraculina, even flashier than this one. She prefers black and wishes the adults in her life would leave her alone about it. Miraculina seeks out the AWOL-looking boy again. He sits up as alone as he can at one of the long tables in the dining room, scarfing down his food as quickly as humanly possible. He glances furtively around at the other guests. Then he pockets the orange and the bag of cheese puffs that come with dinner and gets up to leave. 2. Bryce. Every smart AWOL knows that a soup kitchen can be like a mousetrap. Tempting eats can trigger the iron arm of the law to swing around and snag the unwary. Juvie cops are always stalking out shelters and soup kitchens. Bryce had watched this one for hours before deciding that it was safe. Then had tagged along behind a family that he vaguely resembled to get past the priest who monitored the line. Priests are unpredictable when it comes to AWOLs. The Vatican has never taken an official position on unwinding, which leaves priests the rare privilege of following their conscience rather than papal policy. The man might let him in, or might turn him away, or might call the Juvies. Best to avoid the confrontation entirely. It's not the priest who troubles him now, though. It's the girl who served him his meal. She keeps looking at him. Maybe she likes me, he thinks, or maybe she likes the reward she'll receive from turning me in. Not that the Juvies would pay much for him. It's not like he's the Akron AWOL. He steals a glance at her while she's busy scooping out food. She's cute, in a restrained, every hair in its place kind of way. He wonders if she's working here for community service credit in school or because she actually wants to work here. Then he finds himself irritated by his own curiosity. Curiosity dismembered the dog is an expression known by all AWOLs. He's known more then one AWOL who got caught because they stuck their nose somewhere it did not belong because they were curious. He will not make that same mistake. Whatever this girl's interest in him, he's got to treat it as if she's a threat and get out as quickly as he can and never come back. It means more scavenging trash cans for food, but there are worse things. 3. Miraculina. When she sees the boy get up to leave, Miraculina turns to Sister Barbara and says quickly, "Would it be okay if I left early, sister? I have a test tomorrow." Another lie for confession. Sister looks surprised but nods. Miraculina unties the apron, slips on her sweater, and hurries through the dining room. The boy is gone. Dusk is already settling into night as she reaches the sidewalk. She looks left, then right, and finally spots him turning a corner. The church is in a middle-class neighborhood, but the area goes bad fast as the boy heads towards the freeway. She keeps a safe distance between them. He doesn't seem to hear or sense her behind him. She's been tailing AWOLs and juvie cops for a few months now and has gotten good at it. When Miraculina was a tithe, she thought AWOLs were the worst sort. Criminals guilty of stealing a body that no longer belonged to them, allowing others to die because they were cowards. But ever since her misadventure with Lev, she's much more ambivalent about it. In fact, it keeps her up at night. It's become a bit of an obsession. She talks to juvie cops and muscled buffs who track down runaways. She listens to them boast about their arrests. They don't seem to care about the lives saved by the lungs and livers going to the cancer patients, or the hearts going to the cardiac patients, or the lives improved by corneas and brain sections. It's adrenaline and quotas to them, a competition, a game, nothing more. Some nights, she sneaks out in search of AWOLs when her parents are asleep. Sometimes she finds them, sometimes she doesn't. The adrenaline-charged fear of being alone in the dark corners of the city has become like a drug to her. When she does talk to AWOLs, she finds that some are the criminals she thinks them to be. They run because they've broken a number of laws and feel little to no remorse for it. Whether their hearts were this toxic before they went AWOL is anyone's guess. That's just a very small fraction of AWOLs. Most of the ones she met aren't so bad. They're basically decent kids and certainly have something to offer the world. A lot of them care so much for their friends for fighting against unwinding that they would sacrifice their lives. Kids like Lev. Miraculina slips in a covered bus stop when she sees the boy ahead skirt a freeway overpass and head for a dimly lit pedestrian bridge instead. Her curiosity rises. He's moving towards a really seedy area. Her mother would just die if she knew Miraculina spends time there. The boy still doesn't seem aware that she's following him. Her boots clang on the metal walkway, but the wind roaring around them and the cars thundering on the highway below muffle her passage. She loses sight of him when she reaches the end of the walkway at the spiral staircase to the ground. She doesn't see him walking the main avenue to the factory district, or the road to the dump, or the streets to the bars, tattoo parlors, or strip joints that fill this part of town. Perhaps she lost him and should go home. They're expecting her soon, and after her last disappearance, they're sure to overreact. And anyway, this boy is probably another of those loser AWOLs who can't tell her more than what she already knows. But what if he's the one? What if he knows the secret? What if he can tell her how to turn herself from a bucket of spare parts into a normal girl? With one hand on the staircase rail and one foot pointed back at the church, she grinds her teeth. She hates this worst of all, not knowing what decision to make, feeling that voice in the back of her head telling her that she should be more like Lev, in spite of the fact that he was a no-good clapper with a price on his head. Tired of waffling, she runs down the stairs as fast as she can in pursuit, fighting the urge to go home. She resolves to give up if she can't pick up the trail in a minute or so. Out of breath once she reaches street level, she hesitates for a second, trying to decide which street the kid would have taken when he grabs her from the gloom beneath the stairs. "Who are you?" he rasps. With wiry strength, he pulls her close to him. He stinks of sloppy joes and filth. The AWOL underestimates her. She twists from his grip and shoves him hard. He smacks against the staircase and slides into the trash and weeds. When he starts to scramble away, she jumps him and pins his skinny self to the ground. Sometimes a healthy diet and keeping yourself fit for parts donation comes in handy. "Settle down," she hisses. "I'm here to save you." 4. Bryce. This must be the ultimate humiliation. Not just to be bested by a girl, but to be bested by a girl who serves slop in a soup kitchen. He tries to wriggle out from under her, but the girl's got moves and keeps him pinned. "Stop squirming or I'll hit you so hard you'll think you've entered the divided state." Then, in one smooth motion, she lifts him halfway onto his feet and tosses him to the other side of the staircase, where they will be hidden from view of the nearby empty boulevard. The meager streetlights have come on, but the space behind the staircase, which smells of dirt and urine, is mostly dark. "I'll kill you before I let you turn me in," he threatens, although not entirely sure whether he could follow through on that threat. The girl is not intimidated in the least. "What about 'I'm here to save you' is unclear," she says. "You can't be low cordial, so you must be stupid." He ignores the insult. "Save me how? You mean go back to that church and confess my sins kind of saving? Because that's not going to happen." Your immortal soul is your problem," she says. "I'm talking about saving your hide, because in spite of your unwind order, it's only semi-worthless, not entirely worthless." She shifts slightly so that the street lamp lights her. "What's your name?" she asks. Seeing her clearly makes him feel easier, but not easy enough to answer. "Are you a juvie cop?" he asks. She hoots. "Do I look like a juvie cop?" She straightens importantly. "I know what you're up against. I used to run with AWOLs." He throws her a doubtful look, and she qualifies it. "Well, with one AWOL in particular." "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything. That priest, the one at the soup kitchen. Father Lawrence. He looks for AWOLs and does what his conscience tells him to do. He gets them to safety, and I'm a key part of that safety net." Then she looks him in the eye and asks, "Do you want me to save you or not?" Bryce doesn't need some church girl to save him. He's been saving himself since he turned 13, and his stepmother signed his unwind order. On the other hand, he could use someone who knew a safe way out of town, but safe passage can be expensive. "I don't got any money." "I don't want money. I just want to ask you a question." He tenses, which she must have seen even in the shadows. "But the question can wait. Let's go." He doesn't move. "Go where?" "I know people who can take you to where you'll never have to worry about a harvest camp again." She heads for the sidewalk and waits for him. Still feeling wary, he joins her. She sticks out her hand. "My name is Miraculina Rosselli." He gingerly shakes it. "I'm Bryce Barlow." She squeezes his hand hard. "Pleased to meet you, Bryce." About 4 blocks later, she opens the door to a small store between a pawn shop and tattoo parlor. The sign above the door says Jack and Jill Exterminators. On the roof floats a huge roach balloon. In the window, a poster states virtuously, "We use only environmentally safe products to rid your home of pests." Bryce stalls on the sidewalk. "Exterminators? I'm not a roach. I do not want to be exterminated." "It's a cover for an AWOL rescue operation," Miraculina says impatiently. "It's supposed to be ironic. Now get in before someone sees you." That makes him jump inside, and she shuts the door behind them. The front office looks more like a school counselor's office than an exterminator's place of business. She holds open the small swinging door at the counter and prods Bryce through it. At the back of the office, she rings a bell. Immediately, a voice sounds through the intercom. Too distorted by static to distinguish whether it's male or female. "Are you here for our termite special? A free inspection and 10% off if you decide to use our service. Good till the end of the month." It's a pretty lame code, but the girl presses the button and speaks into the grill as serious as if she works for the CIA. My fire ants are back. In a moment, the door cracks open. That you, Miraculina? Yeah, Jack, I got an AWOL here by the name of Bryce Bower. Barlow, Bryce corrects her. Bryce Barlow. Can you take him? Of course. A man in his late 20s with thinning red hair opens the door wider. He yells over his shoulder, Jill, we got a guess. A woman immediately appears at his side, the top of her head barely reaching his chin. She is wearing a moose oven mitt on her right hand and a wedding ring on her left. With a radiant smile, she pulls Bryce into a hug. He hasn't been held by anyone since forever, but after about 5 seconds, he pats her back awkwardly. When she releases him, he has to turn away because he doesn't want anyone to see how watery his eyes just got. I'm so happy you showed up, Bryce. We have about a gallon of stew left over from dinner and several pieces of my famous rhubarb pie. Hope you're hungry. Bryce, glancing at her oven mitt, says, I could eat a moose, ma'am. Sorry, not on the menu, Jill says. And don't be calling me ma'am. It's Jill. She leads him down the long hallway. 5. Miraculina. Miraculina starts to follow, but Jack stays with her, a hand to her elbow. Let's talk. They return to the office and he peeks through the blinds for a second before turning to her face. He smiles, but it fades quickly. You've become our biggest customer, girl. How many AWOLs have you brought us? 5? 6? 8, she says. Bryce makes 8. He tries another smile, but it vanishes as he looks through the blinds again. What's wrong, she asks. His forehead has more worry lines than she remembers. Suddenly, he looks decades older. We lost 31 kids last week. Parts Pirates took a van in Milwaukee. 2 days later, they clobbered the safe house in St. Louis. She sucks in a breath. Were any of them mine? He shakes his head. No, but I'm not sure how long we've got before one of the kids that got taken cuts a deal with the pirates and tells them where we are and what we're doing. Don't bring any more kids till we find a new place and a new cover. She frowns. But what if... She fizzles to a stop, seeing the wretched look in his eyes. Jack nods to the back of the house. I can't trust anyone till I find out who's selling us out. I'm keeping intel down to just family, and now you. We got 27 kids upstairs, 28 with Bryce. Later tonight, we'll be driving them out in 3 vans to different safe houses. But I don't want you coming around here again, hear me? She shivers, knowing the danger they're in, and feels absolutely furious that she can do nothing to help. I hear you, Jack. Promise me you'll tell Father Lawrence when you've got a new place. He'll let me know. She jerks her head to the back door. Can I tell Bryce goodbye? Walking through the narrow house, she wonders what she'll do if she can't save AWOLs. This is how she keeps up on living whole when she still has such a hard time believing she should be. She has a mission, which she just lost to Parts Pirates. Remembering the Parts Pirates that kept her and Lev imprisoned, she seethes. In the kitchen, Miraculina finds Jill ladling a second helping of stew into Bryce's bowl. Even after dinner at the soup kitchen, he's eating like he's starved. The boy must have gone shy because he's pulled his hoodie low over his face. Jill's brother Griffin is wiping down the stove. He's got a shaved head and a brushy beard, but like Jill, he has a smile that can melt ice. Jill pats Miraculina's cheek. Eat some pie, girl. Then she nudges her brother. Come on, Griffin. We got packing to do. They leave Miraculina alone with Bryce, and she takes the chair across from his, although she hears rustling through the walls, floors, ceiling around her. For a building holding so many hidden children, and it's unnaturally quiet. She's ready to ask her question, the one she asks to all AWOLs she finds, but Bryce pushes the hood off his head, and leans closer to her. You trust these people? He asks. Of course I do. Even the guy with the beard? Miraculina looks at Bryce closely. Why? Bryce shrugs, just asking. Then he holds up his bowl, which is empty again. Could you get me some more? Miraculina goes over to the stove and fills his bowl again. You should pace yourself, she says. Eat too much too fast, and she never finishes the thought, because when she turns back, Bryce is gone. 6. Bryce. It might be nothing. It might just be the paranoia that infiltrates every AWOL's thoughts, but it's protective paranoia. It's there for a reason, and more often than not, when Bryce has a bad feeling about something, caution has saved his life. The guy with the beard might not be the same guy, and even if it is the same guy, it might not be what Bryce thinks. What he saw in the alley last week might have nothing to do with AWOLs. For all Bryce knows, the guy is a tobacco dealer selling cigs on the side to earn some spare cash. Who knows? Maybe the money the guy makes dealing goes right to the AWOL saving operation. Or maybe not. Bryce has a pretty sweet setup. There's an alley a few blocks from the exterminators, behind a row of bars and pawn shops. There are 3 dumpsters back there. 2 are still in use, but the third one is in such bad shape the lid has rusted shut. But there's a huge hole in the back, large enough for a person to climb through. He's filled it with pillows and sofa cushions, and even has a sleeping bag he scarfed from the donation bin. So far, no one's found his personal safe house. He squeezes behind the dumpster and climbs inside, belly bursting from all he's eaten, and peers out through one of the many bullet holes in the old trash bin. No activity in the alley this early at night. Later, there'll be things going on, though. It can be regular entertainment zone out there. Mostly, Bryce ignores it. The scum of the world doesn't bother him in his private domain, and he has no interest in bothering them. But once in a while, he does see things. Like the time he was turning into the alley and he passed 2 men in some sort of clandestine deal. A lot of guys look like that, he tells himself. It wasn't him, and if it was, why should I care? It's not my problem. But it becomes his problem again 10 seconds later when someone climbs through the hole in the trash bin, invading his personal domain. 7. Miraculina. Don't be surprised, says Miraculina, shining her phone light in his face. You're not exactly a stealthy AWOL. Be quiet, Bryce snaps. No one knows about the spot, and if someone out there hears you, she lowers her voice to a whisper. Why did you run? I have my reasons. Something scared you, didn't it? Will you lower your voice? Miraculina takes a deep breath, returns her voice to the faintest of whispers, and lowers her phone so it's not in his face anymore. I need to know what spooked you. Bryce doesn't say anything for a moment. Then, he finally tells her, I saw someone who looked like Griffin taking money in this alley last week. Money for what? I don't know. Miraculina leans back against the rough trash bin wall. Could Griffin be selling them out to parts pirates? It seems unthinkable, and yet they know there is a leak. It has to be someone on the inside. Miraculina knows what she has to do. They're transporting all the kids in a few hours, so if he's making deals in this alley, he'll be back tonight. She thinks about it and nods. I'll wait here with you. She already called her parents, telling them she's staying overnight at the church to help in the shelter. They trust the nuns to take care of her. Tonight, she's just compounding lie upon lie. In the oblique light of her sideways phone, she catches Bryce giving her a faint grin. You don't mind being in a dumpster with an AWOL? Miraculina thinks back to the time when she was trapped in a tiny luggage compartment of a bus traveling cross-country with Lev. They barely had room to breathe, and Lev had to pee in somebody's shampoo bottle. She smiles and finds it odd that this has somehow become a pleasant memory. I can handle it, she tells him. An hour later, to Miraculina's profound despair and disappointment, Griffin makes an appearance in the alley. Both she and Bryce watch through the trash bin's bullet holes as he meets with a man who appears to be missing an ear. Although they speak quietly, and they're at least 20 yards down the alley, she hears enough of the conversation to know that Griffin is the one selling them out. The question is, will Jill believe her or her own brother? Then she realizes she doesn't have to convince her if she has evidence. So she raises her phone to the small hole and opens her camera app. The roach balloon bobs, mocking over Jack and Jill exterminators, looking far more threatening than it ever did before. They waited 10 terrible minutes in the dumpster after Griffin left, afraid they might bump into him on the way back. Neither Jack nor Jill are answering their phones. The call goes straight to voicemail. Just as well, this has to be done in person, and Miraculina knows she can't bring this to Jill. She has to tell Jack. He'll know how to break the bad news to her that her brother has betrayed them. Miraculina doesn't want to see the disbelief and dawning despair in Jill's face. She doesn't want to be the one responsible for wiping Jill's smile away, perhaps forever. The steel security screen is already down over the windows and the door is locked. No sign that anyone's inside. It's always like that after hours. Signs of activity would be suspicious. Miraculina jabs the bell and looks up at the camera she knows is hidden above them to the left of the entrance and gives a thumbs up. The door buzzes open and Miraculina pushes Bryce through. The door from the front office to the back hallway is ajar, which means they don't have to go through the intercom code talk to get in. They both slip through the front office and into the hallway that leads into the kitchen. It's quiet. Too quiet. For a second, she thinks that Jack moved up the transfer and the vans have already left with the kids, which would mean they're on their way to being captured by parts pirates. Then she chides in herself for panicking. It hasn't even been a half hour since they seen Griffin in the alley. She hears movement ahead of them, someone shuffling through cupboards, and they hurry to the kitchen. When Griffin is making himself a sandwich. Is that the AWOL? I'm surprised you were able to drag him back. There's no sign of Jack or Jill anywhere. Bryce turns his back, opening the fridge, lowering his head to look inside. Miraculina can't imagine he'd be hungry at a time like this. And then she realizes that if he had seen Griffin last week on the way to his dumpster, Griffin could have seen him. That was why he kept his hood low when he was here the first time. That's why he's poking his head into the fridge now. She stands in front of him, hoping it's not obvious to Griffin what they're doing. Can you check if there's a bed downstairs for him? Miraculina asks. Griffin spreads mustard with a rather sharp steak knife. But that's not the weapon she's worried about. There's a gun in his belt. It's most likely loaded with tranks, but that's little comfort. He doesn't need a bed. We're moving up the transfer. I've already got my van, and Jack and Jill are out picking up the other two now. We should be ready to go by midnight. Then he goes to the fridge and pulls Bryce away. Dude, you can't leave the door open like that. Everything will spoil. He closes the door and catches sight of Bryce's face. He studies it for a moment too long. Then he frowns. Why do you look familiar, kid? Miraculina feels an awful sinking feeling, but Bryce grins. I was just here for dinner, remember? No, I've seen you before that. Still, Bryce just shrugs it off, playing the part for all he's worth. Everyone says that, sir. I've got an average-looking face. Griffin isn't buying it. Shielded by Bryce, Miraculina groped for something on the counter. Anything to use as a weapon. Griffin's eyes narrow. Were you hanging around an alley last week off of Pershing? Miraculina grabs a glass pot full of hot coffee at the same time. Bryce issues a general denial about hanging about alleys of any kind, but it's too late. He's already been made. Griffin raises his gun, and Miraculina hurls the coffee in his face, then throws the pot at him. As Griffin crashes against the cabinet, the gun goes off, a tranq dart embedding into the wall behind Miraculina. Fear gives them wings as they race upstairs, and Miraculina fervently thanks God when they find the door at the top unlocked. Behind them, Griffin is cursing and wailing his fury, clambering up the stairs, just a few feet away. She slams the door and locks it, hoping that Griffin doesn't have the key with him. But even if Griffin had one, he's not in the frame of mind to use it. He begins kicking and hurling his substantial weight against the old door until it crashes off the hinges. Dressed for their night journeys, kids are coming from bedrooms and bathrooms into the hallway to see what commotion is. Parts pirates! Bryce yells, hoping for these AWOLs it would be like yelling fire into a crowded theater. A small Asian girl with pink barrettes pats him on the arm. No, that's just Griffin. Then she gulps as Griffin storms forward, waving the gun. The kid starts to back away. Now Miraculina builds on what Bryce said. He's a traitor. He's selling kids to the black market. He's selling them to the Burmese Daze. She has no idea if the last part is true, but it gets the desired response. The kids stop backing away and begin to make a stand. The little Asian girl and 3 large boys move forward. Stop, yells Griffin. I'm warning you. He tranks 2 of the boys, but 5 more kids replace them. Then the girl with the pink barrettes leaps at him, delivering the nastiest flying kick Miraculina has ever seen. It pushes Griffin against the wall, knocking the gun from his hand. And in an instant, they are all over him. A dozen frenzied kids punching him, smacking him, kicking him. Miraculina is afraid they might actually tear him apart. Griffin's angry protests degrade to desperate pleas for them to stop. Then Miraculina picks up the trank gun. It slides comfortably into her hand. One by one, the kids see her holding the gun as she moves towards Griffin, and they peel him off till only the girl with the pink barrettes is left, sitting on his chest, punching him with enthusiasm. Bryce pulls the little girl away. Griffin is bloody and bruised. It seems the fight has left him, but Miraculina will not take anything for granted. She holds eye contact with Griffin for a moment, making sure he sees her raise the gun. Griffin is not the least bit repentant. You stupid little... She fires before he finishes the thought, and the last word comes out as a pained grunt. The dart embeds in his sternum. 1 second later, he goes limp, out cold. Miraculina sighs, knowing that she'll be lining up for a confession tomorrow with Father Lawrence. Not for shooting Griffin, but for enjoying it. When Jack and Jill return with extra vans they need for the evening's operation, they realize very quickly that the situation has changed once they see Griffin tied up and unconscious. Miraculina shows them the incriminating pictures, but even without them, Jack and Jill believes her. Jill is furious and heartbroken, but to Miraculina's surprise, she's also relieved. Now that we know where the leak is, no more of our kids will fall prey to parts pirates on our watch. Since Griffin knew the location of the new safe houses, the plan is abandoned, and Jack spends the rest of the night on the phone arranging a new secure location. They still need to leave tonight. There's no telling how many people know the kids are here. Best to abandon this location as soon as possible. The question still remains what to do with Griffin. They can't turn him in because sheltering AWOLs is currently as illegal in the eyes of the law as pirating parts. They'd all be arrested. It's Bryce who comes up with a solution. Leave him here, he says. When you take the kids into the new safe house, just leave him. He'll wake up and everyone will be gone without a trace. And since he's already been paid for information, Miraculina adds, he'll be more worried about retribution from the black marketers than tracking you down. Half an hour later, the kids are loaded into the vans. Father Lawrence shows up to drive the third one. He's never afraid to get his hands dirty when salvation is involved, even if it's just salvation from the juvenile authority. Miraculina notices that Bryce lingers, not getting in either of the 3 vans with the other kids. She hopes it's just because he wants to spend more time with her. You wanted to ask me a question, he asks her. What was it? Somehow it seems odd to ask after all they had been through, but it's a question she asks every AWOL she helps. How do you dream of a future when you're not supposed to have one? How do you keep going when the world has disowned you? Some kids laugh when she asks the questions. Others shrug it off and don't have an answer. But Bryce, to his credit, seriously thinks about it. I keep reminding myself that I'm right and the world is wrong. But How do you know? He smiles. I believe, he says. I don't have your kind of faith, but I got faith in myself, and right now, that works for me just fine. Jack, having triple counted the kids, tells Bryce there's room for him in his van, and Bryce tells him what Miraculina was fearing he might. I'm not going. Jack tries to persuade him, but Bryce cuts him off. Decision final. I've been on my own for more than a year. I'm used to it. I like it that way. I'll be okay. And if you're not, Jack asks, then it's my own fault, he says. I can live with that. You won't live with anything if you get caught, Miraculina points out. You'll be unwound. I'll take that risk. A few minutes later, the van drives off, leaving Bryce and Miraculina alone, dawn just beginning to break through a still, silent haze. Walk me back to the church, Miraculina asks him, although it's more like an order than a request. He's happy to do it. So, Bryce Barlow, Miraculina says playfully as they walk, what do you want to do with this life you're not supposed to have? Tons of things, he tells her. I just don't know what they are yet, but that's okay. One thing I know, one thing I can feel in my bones, I'm going to be important. I'm going to matter. And people are going to know my name. You already matter to the kids you helped save today, she tells him, even if they don't know your name. Yeah, it's funny how that works, isn't it? He says. I mean, look at you. I bet you've touched the lives of a lot of people who don't know your name. You're like the invisible connection between hundreds. She stares at him, his words striking something deep within herself, and suddenly she understands. Her desire to be divided is not about the annihilation of self, but the expansion of herself in the service of others. Being divided would connect her to hundreds, but there are many fulfilling ways to connect, aren't there? Thank you, she says as they reach the church. He laughs. For what? Just because, she says. Because I'd rather say thank you than goodbye. Well, in that case, you're welcome. Then he turns and disappears into the misty dawn. In the community center of the church, some of the sisters are getting breakfast ready while the sheltered guests still sleep. You're here early today, Miraculina, says Sister Barbara. Don't you ever sleep? Miraculina yawns. Once in a while. It's Saturday, isn't it? She'll spend some time here, then go home and sleep the rest of the day. Maybe you can help Sister Vitalis with her tapestry. She can't see well enough to do her work, the poor dear. Sister Vitalis, named after the martyr Saint Vitalis, buried alive under a pile of rocks, sits in a corner trying to repair one of the church tapestries. She seems to work at it morning, noon, and night with endless patience. Let me help you with that, Sister, Miraculina says. The nun is more than happy to share the work. Live like Lev, Miraculina thinks. That was the battle cry of the rescued tithes back in the Kavanaugh mansion. Do not give in to the urge to extinguish oneself into the waters of the world, but instead be a light above those waters to help guide the way. Thank you too, Lev, she thinks, like her brief time with Bryce. She now realizes that her tumultuous friendship with Lev is a gift. She can only hope he is still alive so that she can someday repay him. Sister Vitalis puts the tapestry into Miraculina's lap, graciously allowing her to take over. She knows she doesn't need to surrender her eyes to be the eyes of an old nun, and she doesn't need to surrender her sense of self to connect with others. Besides, she's only 14. She has her whole life to be a martyr.